Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. I say it to many of my friends and neighbors.
But I mean, these children were missing for a very significant period of time. Like, their recollection of how it happened is interesting, but what can they say about those years that they were, missing?
Well, one of the things that is really striking about Miriam is that Miriam only speaks when she was returned to her family, and then the way that she was returned, it was so callous. I guess it was a knock at the door, and here's this little girl on the steps with, a note or something around her neck, like an animal, and that's how she was returned. But the striking thing about Miriam is that when she was returned to her family, she only spoke English, and she spoke English with an American accent. She could only speak English with an American accent.
Wow. Cindy Sheehan, who is a well-known peace activist, has weighed in on this issue in your article that's published on the Muslim Street at muslimstreet.net. Cindy Sheehan says, even if Dr. Siddiqui did shoot at the Americans, reflect on this. Say this case was being tried in Pakistan under similar circumstances for an American woman who happened to be named Dr. Betty Brown, who was captured and repeatedly tortured and raped by the ISI. Here in the States, that woman would be a hero if she shot at her captors, not
because
demonized.
There are accusations that she shot at
Right.
at agents, I guess I'm hearing now.
Yeah, U.S. personnel. And she goes on to say and that she would not be demonized and taken away from her life and her children. Cindy Sheehan says that I believe Dr. Siddiqui is a political prisoner and now the political bogey woman for two U.S. regimes. And, of course, she's talking about the Bush regime as well as the Obama regime.
Yes, absolutely. And I applaud Cindy Sheehan for that very telling piece of commentary, and she's right on. I mean, if Afia Siddiqui had done what they claimed that she did in 2008, I would defend her, and I would defend her right to have done exactly what she did. But the fact of the matter, she didn't do that. That's something that was contrived for the purpose of justifying bringing her to America to stand trial. For the listeners who are not familiar with some of the details of this, after Afia's something happened in 2008 that brought this case involving the sister to a head. 4 men escaped from Bagram. And after they escaped from Bagram, they told stories. They did interviews. They told stories about what had happened to them at Bagram and what they witnessed. They all told the stories of this one woman that was being held there. They didn't know her name. They just knew that she was a Pakistani woman in her early to mid-30s who had been torn away from her children. She didn't know where they were. And they would hear her, and that she had spent a lot of time in America, many years in America. When people in the know began to put two together, they began to realize that this was probably Afia Siddiqui. And as word began to spread more and more, pressure began to build on the U.S. government, the Pakistani government, and the Afghan government. And then that's when she ended up being mysteriously released. But right after she was released, not where they stole her from in Pakistan, she was released on the streets of Ghazni in Afghanistan. An anonymous person made a telephone call to the authorities to say there is this mysterious non-Afghan woman, outside the governor's compound, near the governor's compound. We believe she may be a suicide bomber. We believe the intent was that Afia was supposed to be shot on sight. And if she had been shot and killed,
None of this would have
that
had
would
to
have put an
happen.
end to it.
Yeah,
Right.
you know, last week we talked about the indefinite detention bill here on the Muslim Street, and we put it in a historical context as we look at the 1950s and this paranoia over the Reds and how
That's right.
the American government and McCarthyism reigned. We talked about the 1960s and the 1970s and COINTELPRO and how there were an onslaught against the black liberation struggle in this country, and how black leaders were either assassinated, political prisoners were taken. We talked about the case of Geronimo Pratt. We talked about the case of Daraba bin Wahad, and on and on. They talked about the case of the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton in Chicago in 1969. Now, as we look, and we had actually mentioned this whole thing about the extraordinary rendition. On the heels of this indefinite detention bill that the president said that he can sign, can you kind of close out this discussion, Mauri Salakhan, with your views on that and this whole? It seems like there's a chain of events here.
First of all, the thing about the bill, and I just had a discussion, I had an interview that I did with Sally O'Brien at Pacifica Radio's WBAI in New York just a few days ago. We were talking about this. One of the things that's striking about that piece of legislation, number one, is that only six senators voted against it. 93 voted for it. That's number one. And then all of the leaders of both parties, they voted for it. SubhanAllah. The second thing is that initially President Obama said he was going to veto it. Now he's not going to veto it. The third thing is that these provisions that rightfully have people up in arms, rightfully have people alarmed by what they portend. The reality is America has been doing this for years. It's already doing this. And so this will only legitimize it. This will only codify it. And I guess the last point I can make about this, and it's something that every committed Muslim and every concerned citizen in America should really take to heart. And that is what we are seeing post 9/11 in America, the land that projects itself around the world as the land of liberty and justice for all, the leader of democracy. What we're seeing is Machiavelli's advice to the princes and the other monarchs of his day in the 15th century.
Mauri, I agree with you
Go ahead.
completely. I agree with you completely. I just, we have to wrap up this segment right now.
Okay.
And speaking of Machiavelli's Prince, I was doing some reading, and apparently that was written as satire. I don't know if you were aware of that, but I guess that's the irony of the Prince at the very end of the day. But
Yeah.
I did want to leave off our listeners with this by asking you, because you are very familiar with Dr. Siddiqui's case, what is the takeaway? What do you see for her future? And please, again, go ahead and give them that website that they can visit.
Okay, the website is freeafia.org, www.freeafia.org. The bottom line is this. What they're trying to do right now to Afia at this institution, and that's the reason why we're having this emergency mobilization this coming Saturday, is they are trying to kill her. They want Afia to commit suicide. If they can't get her to commit suicide, they're trying to find a backdoor way of killing her, or if they can't do that, they're trying to assault her humanity, her psyche, as savagely as they possibly can in order to drive her mad, so that if she is ever released, keeping in mind she's under an 86-year sentence, if she is ever released as a result of the pressure building in the Court of International Opinion for her, then she will be in such a state that she will not be able to tell her story to the world, a story that will embarrass America, that will indict many high-level officials in at least two countries, and this is what they're afraid of. This is the bottom line.
Well, thank you for joining
us. The other
us.
side of that coin is that the longer this Muslim woman, who has done nothing but good, is in this condition that she's in and being tortured the way that she is, the more it takes away from our own humanity.
You want to thank you for joining us, Brother Mauri Salakhan, and stay tuned for the next segment. You've been listening to The Muslim Street.